Right, so today's episode is going to be a little bit different as far as organization goes because of, well, those things. Ah. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 65 of Discovering Doctor Who. Today the episode I'm going to be talking about, if you already didn't know, is night terrors. And I was not expecting much from this episode, to be completely honest. Especially from some of the comments that I've seen, not necessarily on my videos, just about the episode in general, just kind of looking online. So I didn't know what to expect. But yeah, as I mentioned in the little intro there, let's get right into things, starting with my annoyances for this episode. Yeah, I'm switching things around a little bit. So yeah, let's start with that. My first annoyance with this episode was the kid's acting, or the kid that played George. His acting just wasn't very good. Now given it's a young kid, and I mean there have been some pretty good child actors in this show and other shows that I've seen, but you know, you can't expect them all to be that great, but you know, still it's like the kid just wasn't that good. Now that doesn't really make a major impact on the episode, but for me overall it's just kind of like, I can't believe this kid. It's like, I can't really believe that he's supposed to be scared. But that's just me. Now moving on, my second annoyance with this episode was more of a question really. The old lady that gets sucked into the trash bags and then ends up in the dollhouse. Does she get turned, or is she just kind of stuck in the dollhouse wandering around lost? Because unless I'm mistaken, she's the only character that gets turned into one of those dolls that we don't actually see it happen, if it actually does happen. Or no, wait, she's the only one we don't see get turned into one of them, so that's why I'm curious whether she actually gets turned or if she just got lost. I don't know. If I missed something, please do let me know. I mean, there could have been something subtle like the color of the doll's hair or something like that that I missed, but yeah, just kind of curious there. And admittedly, those are my only two annoyances with this episode. If I think of any others while I'm going through this, I'll point them out, but seriously, those were the only two real complaints I had with this episode at all. Now moving on, let's get into my favorite parts of this episode. Starting with put everything scary in the cupboard. You put it in the cupboard. Like in the last episode, you put Hitler in the cupboard. That connection there was just amazing. And I know, I'm pretty sure some of you were being subtle / not so subtle about that, in previous episodes' comments. And I absolutely love that connection. I thought it was really good. And yeah, honestly, I didn't catch it at first, but then when it was mentioned later about putting, you know, all the things that frighten the boy in the cupboard, I was just kind of like, wait a minute, they put Hitler in the cupboard. Oh, Moffat, oh! So, yeah. Well, actually, Mark Gatiss wrote this episode, so Mark stealing from Moffat or something, I don't know. But yeah, I just really like that connection. Now moving on, my second favorite part of this episode was the interactions with the Doctor and the kid. And I guess you could even expand that to the interactions with the Doctor and Alex, the kid's dad. And even though I didn't completely care for the kid's acting, Matt Smith, like, seems very natural when he's working with children. It's like, you know, I mean, even though, you know, I guess as natural as you can portray the Doctor anyway, is this like, you know, that Matt Smith seemed really comfortable with the kid when they were acting together, and even the kids seemed to, I guess you could say, like, the actor sort of lightened up a little bit, and even he seemed a little bit more believable in his role when interacting with the Doctor. So yeah, just that, all of that, and the Doctor sort of taking on a, you know, the role of a psychologist or a counselor in a way, I found to be really interesting, which actually brings me to my third favorite part of this episode, the psychology. And there is so much more than I'm going to touch on in this episode, but just all the different all the different ways that psychology plays a role in this episode. From obviously the child being terrified, of being afraid, all the way to that connection we find at the end that, you know, the boy, or well, the alien boy was terrified of being rejected by his family, and that's was causing all of these things to happen. And just just trying to do it off the top of my head isn't doing it justice, but just the psychology surrounding this episode is phenomenal. Now, Jill didn't watch this one with me, but I really am going to make sure that she watches this episode, because I would love to get her thoughts on it. And if she has any particularly strong thoughts about it, I may actually record, not her reaction, but, you know, her thoughts on it afterward, because I would love to get her perspective. Just because, well, like I said, the episode was just amazing in that way. But moving on, let's get to my fourth and final favorite part of this episode. The dolls. The frickin', what are they? Peg dolls, or whatever they are. God, I hate those things. But they were one of my favorite parts of the episode. Okay. Now, I realize that overall, in concept, these things may not be one of the scariest creatures to come out of the Moffat era, or even, you know, other episodes that have come in the past for Doctor Who. But allow me to explain why these things freak me out so much, and basically why they're one of my favorites. Since childhood, I have hated porcelain dolls. And really just most, you know, dolls that have those just blank faces. Like, okay, I don't know if you ever saw The Conjuring, but one of the best parts of that movie was a very small part, and it's the doll Annabelle that is one of the creepiest looking things I've ever seen in my life. Now, there was the movie Annabelle, which had some creepy aspects, but the movie sucked. Don't bother watching it unless you can watch it for free. But that extended from just a childhood of my little sister, and I think even my older sister, collected these porcelain dolls, and they freaked me out. And even my older sister, she would have these old theater masks, or like these porcelain theater masks, placed around her bedroom, and when I was younger, I would sleep in there sometimes, especially when she had gone on to college, and I would wake up and I would see these blank, smiling and frowning faces looking at me, and it freaked me out. And going back to The Conjuring a little bit, and connecting with my childhood a little bit more, there was a period in time, it was when I was at college, and yes, this happened when I was at college, and during a little bit during high school, but there was one room that used to be my little sister's, that became the computer room, but became my bedroom after, you know, I had moved out of the house and started going to college. And just dropped part of the sonic screwdriver. In that room was this little, or not little, but this really big Raggedy Ann doll that belonged to my little sister. And it was huge. It had these huge black eyes. You know, perfectly. It was cute. It was sweet. It was, you know, nice. But I woke up one morning. It was really, really dark. And I look over, and, you know, there's just like a little bit of light coming through, and all I can see is this big, round, pale face with these gigantic black eyes sitting up in a little kid's rocking chair in what in my mind was staring at me. Now, in connection with that, the actual Annabelle, if you believe the lore, was a Raggedy Ann doll, which I found out recently. So yeah, me and creepy dolls have a really history. So yeah, while I can only assume the dolls in this episode may not have had as much of an effect on other people as it might have me, between the singing of that song, that tick-tock goes the clock, the giggling, and just the blank, creepy little faces, it was really good and just really effective for me as far as the creepiness factor goes. And that's going to lead into My favorite, well, I guess this isn't out of order, but my song of the episode, and it's not an actual song. It's not a song you'll find on one of the CDs or the soundtrack. It's that tick-tock goes the clock poem that the little dolls sing. And it's, I mean, for obvious reasons why it's the song of the episode, just because it was really good and it really set the mood, and it's still giving me chills thinking about that. I'm such a dork. But yeah, that's the song of the episode. Again, even though it's not really a song, it's only a like little nursery rhyme being sung by these dolls, it's like it stood out much more than any of the songs from the soundtrack that I heard. So, yeah, there you go. And now that's going to bring me to my quote of the episode, which will bring us a little bit out of that place I'm in right now, with a quote from Rory. And honestly, I think this may be one of Rory's best quotes. It's easily in my top 5, and it kind of breaks the fourth wall in a way, or maybe not. Maybe it's just sort of like an insight into his life at that point. But it's after Rory and Amy wake up when they, like, the elevator or lift goes down really fast and they disappear. And Rory says, "We're dead, aren't we? The lift fell and we're dead. We're dead. Again." that just is such hilarious insight. It's almost like Rory's seeing a pattern to everything. It's just like he's basically saying, how many times have I died at this point? How many times have we died at this point? So yeah, I absolutely loved that quote. Now, this wasn't an episode I would say is really full of many quotable lines. I'm sure there are a few others if you all want to point any of those out, but again, for me, that was by far the quote of the episode, and definitely one of Rory's absolute best. Top 5 in my book. As for my overall thoughts on this episode, looking at IMDb and comparing the scores, I was a bit surprised, I won't lie, based on my opinion, but whereas the previous episode I found kind of was rated fairly high on sites like IMDb, whereas this episode was rated lower than the previous one for sure. But for me, I really liked this episode. I loved the fact that it's a standalone. It really doesn't have much, if any, connection that I can tell to any of the other episodes, other than the little Hitler reference in the cupboard, obviously. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It was, I would argue, one of Mark Gaddis's stronger episodes recently. And I just really like the story overall. Like I said, I really only had a couple of complaints or a couple of annoyances with it. Now, I'm not going to say it's a great episode. It wasn't outstanding by any means. It's probably not going to make it into like my top 5 for this season. But overall, I really did enjoy it. Between the psychology, the story, the relationships of the characters, I just thought it was well executed. So yeah, definitely a thumbs up for me on this one. Now, as for a question, especially since this episode is pretty disconnected from any of the others, as far as I can tell at this time, my question of the episode is, do the dolls freak anyone else out? Or not even just the episode, or the dolls from this episode, but just like porcelain dolls and those things with the pale, blank faces in general. Is it just me, or does that freak any of you out as well? Because I know it can't just be me, otherwise Annabelle, as horrible of a movie as it was, wouldn't have been made, because The Conjuring did it right. But yeah, let me know, are any of you freaked out by those little creepy dolls, whether it was the ones in this episode or the ones that people collect in real life? So yeah, I think this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than usual, surprisingly. Everyone, thank you very much for joining me for 65 episodes so far, not including, like the season recaps and everything. I'm going to do my best, absolute best, to get another episode out on Friday. I can't guarantee it, but if not on Friday, I am going to aim for Saturday. So look for episode 66, which is The Girl Who Waited on either Friday or Saturday. And be sure to check my social media to keep up with that, and I'll let you all know which is the more likely outcome. And in the meantime, if you want to check out any of the other videos I've been putting up recently, I've got my weight loss update that went up here. The most recent episode is Snackin', which was really good. I think a lot of you might like this, especially if you like jerky. Go check that out here. And I put out a new Let's Play over at the Cult of Awesome channel, which was my first console attempt. So, and that turned out pretty well, so I'd love to hear what you all think. If you would, go and check it out right here. I'll put an annotation there. And of course, I'll put links to all 3 videos down in the description below. And until next time, everyone, when I'll be seeing you all for The Girl Who Waited, yeah, Alon Z, everyone, and Geronimo. Really got to work on these outros. Geronimo!